Vagabond is a masterpiece. If you have read this manga already, you probably know what I'm talking about. And the reasons for that are not only its amazing ambientation and its beautiful artwork, which is one of the best I have ever seen, but also its fluid narrative, storytelling, and maybe the most important aspect of the manga, its deep reflections and the philosophy behind the story. And this is why I wanted to make this video. To not only admire this beautiful masterpiece, but also to reflect about the philosophies behind it, like Taoism and Zen Buddhism, and try to explain them, at least a little bit. Keep in mind that I'm not a true specialist in any of these matters, and this will be more like a video to ramble about my thoughts and reflections about it. So first, let's talk about what is Vagabond. Vagabond is a manga series written and illustrated by the famous mangaka Takehiko Inoue, the same artist who made Slam Dunk and Real. The manga was published in the Kodansha's weekly magazine Morning from 1998 to 2015, when the series entered a hiatus, unfortunately. Until now, it consists in 37 manga volumes, which have sold more than 80 million copies, and the series has even won the Kodansha Manga Award in the 2000s and the Grand Prize from the Tezuka Osamu Cultural Prize in 2002. The manga is an adaptation of an epic novel called Musashi from Eiji Oshikawa. It is basically a work of fiction based on the life of a real Japanese swordsman called Miyamoto Musashi, formerly known as Shinmen Takezo. And we know that the real Miyamoto Musashi was a Zen Buddhist himself. The story takes place in the 1600s after the Battle of Sekigahara. Two teenagers, Shinmen Takezo and Honiden Matahashi, were survivors from the losing side. They both decided that they would become invincible under the heavens, and after that battle, they take separate ways. Takezo becomes a vagabond and lives a life as a ronin, a Japanese wanderer, taking sword fights with challenging opponents. And Matahashi decides to stay with women and live a depraved life. Takezo has always been despised by his village for being an antisocial and violent kid, being even accused by Matahashi's mother of being a criminal after Matahashi went missing. This leads to Takezo confronting pursuers and taking a violent path again, until he meets a monk, Soho Takuan, who makes him start reflecting about his intentions and purpose in life. This is the first of many encounters of Takezo with the monk, which are interesting points where he makes some reflections about his decisions. Takuan analyzes Takezo and concludes that Takezo is totally frightened. He looks big in his outform, but he has a small heart. Takezo lives an instinctive life almost. Sometimes he seems like an animal, recluding himself in the forest, and when he trains, he almost becomes the forest and the nature itself. It is similar to another character that shows up in the later parts of the manga, Sasaki Kojiro. Kojiro is deaf, and because of his disability, he also lives his life in a more instinctive way. It seems like he perceives life in another form. And maybe this is why both Takezo and Kojiro became good swordsmen. In the later parts of the manga, Takezo, or Musashi, even becomes more and more reflective about life and his decisions. When he meets the boy Yori, he decides to help him. Planting rice, he realizes all the difficulty behind obtaining food and resources, and also the value of the simple things. This farming arc is similar somehow to the Villain Saga farming arc, but this is a topic to another video. And when Musashi leaves Yori, he advises him to become a farmer and not a swordsman. Musashi starts to sculpt his Buddha figures, to write and to reflect about human life and the meaning of the sword. In another part of the story, while he's training in the forest, he realizes that if he wants to succeed and to surpass his older form, he must be like water and flow like water. The water changes its shapes and adapts itself to various forms. It can fit a cup or an ocean. And this is a very Taoist way of thinking, actually. Okay, so enough story for now, and let's go talk about Taoism and Zen Buddhism, or at least what I understood about these philosophies. The Japanese and all oriental culture are very influenced by Zen Buddhism and Taoism. So, Taoism is a millennial philosophy originated in China in the 6th century before Common Era. Taoism focuses on going with the flow and doing things in the natural way. One of its principles is the Wu Wei, which can be translated as non-doing. This doesn't mean exactly that you should stand still and wait for things to happen in your life, but it's more like going with the flow instead of swimming against the current. Maybe this is what Musashi thought when he realized he had to be like water. Some authors, like Alan Watts, say that you can understand the concept of the Wu Wei better when you compare it to its opposite concept, which would be the Yu Wei. The Yu Wei is composed by two symbols, a hand and the moon. It means the idea of trying to capture the moon with your own hands. Of course, you cannot capture the moon, and this is the thought behind the Wu Wei. Accepting what you cannot control and accepting these illusions and the changes in your life. Most of the thoughts behind Taoism are expressed in the book of poetry Tao Te Ching, which is the most well-known scripture from Taoism. But the thing is, Taoism says that you cannot express what the real Tao is with words. So the poetries in the Tao Te Ching are some reflections and some way to express our thoughts about it. The Tao may be the absolute principle underlying the universe, but the real Tao cannot be expressed with words. A Taoist doesn't waste time in a riverbank thinking about 1,000 ways to cross the river, thinking about the temperature of the water or how he feels when he enters the water. Instead, he just simply crosses the river. The idea of the yin-yang is also a Taoist concept. Life is supposed to be lived in balance, and the yin-yang is a symbol of the opposites in balance, but knowing that these opposites are not separated. You can see in the yin-yang that there is the white inside the black and there is the black inside the white. Nature does not recognize things as good or evil, or life and non-life. Everything is in harmony in nature, and Taoism encourages you to accept and live in that harmony. Now, Zen Buddhism is a school of the Mahayana Buddhism, which also originated in China, and which has deep connections to Taoism. Zen encapsulates the Taoist thoughts with Mahayana Buddhism, and they give an ethical sense to its philosophy. To make this video and to learn more about Zen Buddhism, I started doing a research and also reading some books from Alan Watts, like The Spirits of Zen, which I also recommend as a good place to start if you want to learn more about it. So, Zen Buddhism believes that what our mind and body conceives as the external world is actually a reflection. Because our understanding of the world is based on our physical senses, we try to understand the world based on what we think it is. But our vision of the world is actually based on our state of mind. It's like we are looking at a mirror to try to see the world. And we try to find our meaning and our happiness in the forms that appear in these reflections, instead of trying to look to ourselves and our internal world. The thing is, we'll never achieve happiness if we try to capture and obtain those forms. Nothing is actually ours. And we will never find a Buddha in the outside world if we haven't found it before in ourselves. And what we conceive as ourselves and our own body and mind is just a form that we perceive the universe. Zen believes that we are not real separate beings, but the individuals are actually a part of the larger whole. And because a little part will never be able to obtain the larger whole, the practice of detachment is a big part of Zen's philosophy. Matahashi, for example, got caught up on the frivolous things of life and ended up envying Musashi. And Musashi, on the other way, lives this detachment. He lives according to his nature and he doesn't even fear death. This is one of the reasons that he became so strong. Zen also believes that you must achieve this freedom of the spirit and the total acceptance of the course of life if you want to be free. Another interesting reflection is the concept of muga. Muga is a Japanese term to a technique translated as without ego or without self. The idea is to attain a state of consciousness where you cannot separate the notions between self and the surrounding world. For example, when Musashi fights, he is his sword. One thing that Miyamoto Musashi describes in his book, The Book of Five Rings, is the focus on the battle itself, where the sword becomes an extension of your body and you don't actually think about it, you just fight. This is the state of mind behind the Bushido, or the way of the warrior. And you may be wrong if you think that the idea of a Zen Buddhist is of a static and ultra-calm person. Alan Watts says in his book that a Zen master must be gentle and full of compassion like a bodhisattva, but also agile and relentless like lightning, or like a samurai. There are lots of comparisons of Zen with the samurai life, like in this quote from Miyamoto Musashi himself. Under the sword lifted high, there is hell making you tremble, but go ahead and you have the land of bliss. Know your enemy, know his sword. Samurai and a Zen master must also practice the economy of energy. Another quote from the Tao Te Ching says, "The skillful traveler leaves no traces of his wheels or footsteps. The skillful speaker says nothing that can be found fault with or blamed. You must use only the necessary amount of energy for each of your tasks." There are many other concepts from Zen Buddhism that I could speak on, like the koans, the zanza, and the satoru, but I think that I have spoken too much about Zen Buddhism already. Anyway, these were just some reflections and overall thoughts about what I learned about Zen and about Taoism. I know that there is a lot more, and we just scratched the surface here. There are things in the manga that cannot be expressed in an analytical way totally, but must be experienced while reading it. This is why I suggest all of you to read the manga if you haven't already. I'm also not a specialist on these philosophies, as I said before, so feel free to comment on what you think and what you understand about them, and also there are probably more connections of Vagabond with these philosophies that I have not put in this video. As a final thought from Zen, don't waste time wondering about where the Buddha is. Instead, go ahead. So thank you for watching this video. If you like it, please don't forget to subscribe. We will upload more and more videos about manga, animes, games, fantasy, RPGs in general, and also about reflections and philosophies if you want to. So until next time.